Wow, good morning. What a difference a few years makes. I remember in 2012, I was in Davos at the World Economic Forum, and I was wandering the corridors wide-eyed and excitedly talking to anyone who would listen about the opportunity from digital currencies and blockchain. And I remember being looked at like a lunatic, even by the tech entrepreneurs there. And so 6 years later, here we are at the United Nations. I might still seem a bit like a lunatic to some, but at least I've got a bigger crowd now, and a smarter one at that. So in those intervening years, we've seen billions of dollars flow into startups in the blockchain and crypto space, showing the level of interest around the world for these new distributed ledger technologies. And the mass media has also got in on the act. One week they tell us that blockchain will save the world, and the next week they'll tell us blockchain might destroy the world. Never in the history of humanity have people got so animated about something as exciting as a type of database. But I talk about, obviously blockchain is much, much more than just a type of database. But I emphasize the simplicity of the technology here because I don't think it's the technology itself that's actually going to deliver net benefits for humanity. It never is. And that's why this session is so useful. We can discuss intentions, we can discuss context. And it's why I'm pleased my university's had the chance to co-organize this session with the support also of the Blockchain Charity Foundation. I'm really happy that they're here with us today. It's also quite remarkable and should be recognized the leadership of UNCTAD to invite people together, member states and others, to explore the pros and cons of this new technology. But I was thinking I should probably cover some of the basics so that we're all on the same page for the discussions that are to come. So for those of you who know this already, just please bear with me. A blockchain is a record of data that's comprised of blocks which are added over time from a distributed network of participating computers. So that means the data can't be changed, can't be hacked, can't be switched off or lost. So blockchain was invented in 2008 to serve as the transaction ledger for the cryptocurrency called Bitcoin. But today blockchains support a far wider range of applications than currencies because they're offering immutable or unchanging records that can be public and enable interoperability. Now that's interesting. Many governments who are struggling with legacy IT systems that have difficulty talking to each other. Another function of blockchains that's driving the interest is this idea of smart contracts. That's a contract between two parties where a payment can be made automatically when a shipment arrives, or if profits reach a certain level, automatically dividends can be paid out. Now this technology is moving so fast, and we're going to hear many different types of technology and things that have come after blockchain today. But we're using the term blockchain to basically describe a whole suite of technologies which are promising greater transparency, coordination and automation. And we're going to hear a range of examples of how these things, also called distributed ledgers, are being deployed for useful outcomes. One example we're going to hear about is some great work in Kenya, where blockchains are combining with grassroots initiatives to provide some of the poorest in society there with currencies of their own so they can trade with each other. Another example I particularly like is a cryptocurrency called Stellar, which is actually enabling chains of credit between peers, and on top of those rails a range of applications are now being used by microfinance organizations across Africa. So we're going to be hearing much more about all these types of applications today, but also in the a side event that UNRISD are organizing for us this afternoon. But despite some of these positive examples, the use of these technologies for everyday applications is still rare. And some say blockchain-based cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are dangerous to our financial system, to our security, and to the environment. So how do we address those concerns is something that we really need to discuss. And of course, there's the matter of how these technologies could be used to address the critical problems that humanity faces today. Now, when exploring these questions, I think it's helpful to keep an open mind. With any kind of technological advance, we can look at it with a sense of intrigue, wonder, or confusion and concern. But I think we should try and look at blockchain not with either naive optimism or blind skepticism. And we shouldn't actually also just accept being a bystander to developments in this technology, because technology is neither good or bad for humanity. It depends on how we shape it. So we need to see responsible management to maximize the intended benefits and minimize the unintended drawbacks. So I think we can look at blockchain and crypto and question about where are the positive outcomes and how they can be maximized. And I think wider stakeholder participation will be essential to do that well, and that's why it's so important that we're all here today. The Sustainable Development Goals offer one framework for thinking about public need. And we're going to hear a range of efforts that are actually using blockchain and crypto to deliver on specific SDGs. But I'd like to invite us to consider something bolder and more urgent. Although climate change is included in the SDGs, the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, I think, invites a reprioritization. It implies that climate change is now a planetary emergency posing an existential threat to humanity. So the artist who created this incredible ceiling, Palais, when he was asked what inspired him to create this ceiling, he spoke of a mirage he saw in the Sahel, where he saw the animals, the trees and people somehow melting into the sky. And I'm wondering, is this some kind of dramatic metaphor for us here in the Human Rights Room of the UN about the terrible possibilities of what climate chaos could do to our planet and the human race? So as our climate spirals away from one friendly to our civilization, we need to wake up to why we've been so incapable of changing our ways collectively at scale. Despite decades of deliberation and initiative, including in these buildings, carbon emissions continue to rise. I think that's because action on this issue has always been an add-on and never a starting point for our systems of economic organization. So although it's typical for conversations like ours today to focus on how to improve the current global system, I'm going to ask you to consider something far bolder, and that's the need to transform our economic system and transform it fast. And here's the critique, and it's not a shy one. Currently, stock markets incentivize the maximization of company growth and profitability. That can encourage firms to manipulate people to consume more while externalizing costs onto society and the environment. But an ever deeper driver of humanity hitting natural limits is our monetary system, which is based on privately issued debt. Nearly all electronic deposits are created by banks as interest-bearing loans. For this system to function normally, more of our Earth's resources must be consumed to generate the yields to service those debts. Otherwise, when loans are paid off, our money supply simply dries up. Now, that system was okay for a time. It was okay in some places, but not now. The climate chaos we face is nature's answer to our hubris that we could think we could expand forever. A systemic redesign of our banking and corporate systems is long overdue. Until now, people in senior roles have preferred less awkward explanations for our many problems. But I think that complacency is becoming a grave threat to life on Earth. We now know that many self-reinforcing feedbacks have begun to further warm our planet, threatening to take the future out of our hands. So if we don't wake up from our delusions of what is really pragmatic and appropriate, then shame on us. So what do we actually do? I think it means there needs to be a gateway question for any new technology. How is it going to help us to build resilience and reduce harm? So when I look at blockchain and crypto, I'm asking what opportunities there might be to transcend our self-harming monetary and corporate systems. And I think no lesser question is sufficient given our planetary emergency. So here are some questions for you that might arise from that kind of starting point. Could we see forms of company financing through digital token sales which don't necessitate share price competition and the perpetual growth of every corporation? Could we see forms of money that are tied to natural ecosystem maintenance or issued fairly to people for work of real value? Could blockchains be designed to be as energy efficient as possible? Could they be designed not to enrich speculators or try and build monopolies? Could they be designed to enable upgrades driven by the beneficiaries rather than those commercial interests that control the tech? Could blockchain projects take a more integral approach where the code itself and the internal governance are aligned with sustainable outcomes? In technical terms, the answer to all these questions is absolutely yes. But sadly, these approaches are being marginalized when they don't promise a quick buck. I'll give you one example to finish. Today, in 200 communities around the world, people are swapping goods and services with their neighbors without using any money, using a software from the Credit Commons Collective. And because of a handful of volunteers maintaining that software, those communities don't pay for an app, they don't see adverts, they don't have their data harvested, and they own their own installation of this open source software. And the people using this, about 30,000 people around the world, are using very, very basic software. And the reason is no one is funding its upgrade because there's no profit in it. So if we want transformative change, we will need a shift in ambition from aid agencies and from philanthropists to an agenda of transformation and taking risks to do that. Now, currently, social impact projects using blockchain are extremely useful, but many of them are based on suboptimal technologies. And as we face this existential climate crisis, it's simply not good enough to base environmental initiatives on systems with code that burn up huge amounts of electricity. Now that's a reminder how we're going to need collective leadership, not bystanders, to shape blockchain and cryptocurrencies for significant and scalable public benefit that really meets the needs of our time. So as we discuss the potential of these technologies, let's remember that any technology is really our knowledge and our system for creating things. That depends as much on our intention as any code or any gadget. So as we look at the difficult times ahead, it's our intention for creating things that needs to more often arise out of love for each other and for creation. The technology we seek is not some kind of new distributed database. The technology we really seek now is love. So as we hear contributions in this session today, I recommend you think about how are the specific initiatives you're hearing are empowering people and responding to our planetary emergency. Now, if that is the basis for our conversations here today, then I think this is really a wonderful and useful gathering indeed. So my message to you is please don't hold back. Thank you.